It had been nearly 10 years since I'd last thought about Derek. Life has a way of burying people under layers of time and memory, until one day their name pops up on your phone, and suddenly the past comes rushing back like floodwater. I was sitting in my apartment in Portland scrolling aimlessly through Facebook when his friend request appeared. Derek Collins. The name hit me like a whisper from childhood. His profile picture showed him standing on a dock, a calm lake behind him, the kind of lake we grew up around in Idaho. The caption read, "Back where it all started." Back where it all started. The phrase unsettled me, though I couldn't say why. I accepted his request, and almost immediately a message appeared. "Hey man, long time, I'm in town for work. Dinner?" For a moment I hesitated. I hadn't been back to Idaho since college. I'd moved on. New job, new city, new life. But nostalgia is a dangerous thing. It creeps up and convinces you the past is safer than it was. So I said yes. We met the next night at a small diner downtown, one of those places that still smelled like grease and coffee no matter how many times they cleaned the floors. Derek looked older, leaner, his hair thinner and darker than I remembered, but his grin was the same, easy and familiar. "Man," he said, clapping me on the back, "you haven't changed a bit." I laughed, though I knew I had. "Neither have you. How long's it been?" "Too long," he said, smiling as if we were about to step into an old adventure. Dinner started light. Stories about high school, the stupid pranks we pulled, the endless summer afternoons biking through the pines behind my parents' house. He remembered everything, right down to the color of my bike, a red Schwinn with the paint scraped off the handlebars. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "Your mom used to make that stew. What was it called? The one with the beef and carrots. Smelled like heaven." I nodded slowly. Yeah, she did. "And that trail," he continued. "Behind your place, the one that led to the lake. You and I used to sneak down there at night. You remember?" "Of course," I said, though a strange unease crept in. "Silver Lake. My sister used to tag along sometimes." Derek leaned back, his smile fading into something unreadable. Then softly he said, "I still think about that night by the lake. What we did." The fork slipped from my hand, clattering onto the plate. My throat tightened. What are you talking about?" I asked. He tilted his head, eyes glinting in the dim light. "You really don't remember, do you?" Before I could say another word, he stood, threw a few bills on the table, and walked out. That night, sleep refused to come. His words looped through my mind until I couldn't take it anymore. I dug out an old box from my closet, the one with photos, letters, and the only newspaper clipping I kept from that time. "Local girl presumed drowned at Silver Lake." That girl was my sister, Amy. I was 9 when it happened. The report said I'd gone to the lake to look for her. They said she fell in. The police called it an accident, but as I stared at the faded paper, one line caught my eye for the first time in years. Only 2 sets of footprints were found leading to the water, believed to belong to the victim's brother, and an unidentified second individual. My heart began to race. Back then, they assumed I'd gone alone. No one ever asked about Derek. I grabbed my phone to call him, but his number was disconnected. His Facebook page was gone. And that's when I noticed the reflection in my laptop screen. A faint outline of my sister's face just behind mine, her eyes fixed on the lake photo I hadn't realized Derek had tagged me in. The next morning I drove. No plan, no destination, just an ache to see the place again. Idaho was 6 hours away, but my thoughts made the trip shorter and stranger. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. My parents had moved to Arizona years ago, leaving the old house near Silver Lake to decay. As I pulled onto the gravel road leading to it, the pine trees rose up around me like sentinels of the past. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the porch sagging. I stood there for a long time, letting the silence press against me. Childhood memories flickered. Amy laughing on the swing, Dad yelling for us to come inside before dark, Derek daring me to go deeper into the woods. Inside, the air was stale. Dust floated like ghosts through the shafts of sunlight. I found my old room untouched, the same posters, the same faded carpet. On the desk sat a cracked photo frame of Amy and me, both grinning, our arms around each other. I whispered, "Hey, kiddo," though I wasn't sure if I was talking to her memory or something else. That evening, I walked the trail. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself remembered. The trees leaned in close, whispering things I couldn't quite hear. When I reached the lake, the water was still, reflecting the twilight sky. I knelt down, running my fingers through the cold surface, and felt something. A rush of memory. Laughter. Splashing. Amy's voice calling my name. And then, a scream. I staggered back, heart pounding. "Derek!" I shouted into the darkness, the name echoing over the water. There was no answer, but on the opposite shore I thought I saw a figure. Tall. Still. Watching. I barely slept that night. The wind outside moaned through the pines, carrying sounds that didn't belong to nature. At dawn, I drove into town to the public library. If Derek really had lived here, there'd be a record somewhere. School yearbooks, census data, something. The librarian, a kind woman named Mrs. Harper, helped me dig through archives. I found our old class photos. There I was, grinning in the back row, but no Derek. Not in any of them. "Are you sure he went here?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. I nodded numbly. We were inseparable. He had brown hair, kind of tall for his age, always wore a denim jacket. She scanned the photos again. "Sorry, honey. Maybe he moved before picture day." But I knew that wasn't true. Derek had been everywhere, in every memory, every adventure, every secret. Before leaving town, I stopped by the sheriff's office to ask about the old report. The deputy on duty gave me a polite but puzzled look. "That case is closed, sir. No one named Derek Collins was ever questioned." Back at the house, I searched through the attic, desperate for proof he existed. Boxes of old toys, Christmas decorations, report cards. Nothing. Then, buried under a stack of books, I found it. A small leather journal, my handwriting. The year scratched on the front. 1998. The first few pages were innocent. Notes about school, doodles, comic book ideas. Then halfway through, the tone shifted. "Derek says Amy likes to follow us. He says she's a spy. Derek told me to scare her so she'd leave us alone. He says we should take her to the lake tonight." My hands shook as I read. The last entry chilled me to the bone. "It's done. She's gone. Derek said we can never tell anyone." I dropped the journal, my breath caught in my throat. The words were mine, but I had no memory of writing them. That night, the knocking started. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the front door. When I opened it, no one was there. Only footprints, small ones, leading away toward the woods. I followed them, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and rain. The trail wound toward the lake again, and halfway there I heard it, a voice faint and familiar. "Eli." It was Amy. My knees went weak. "Eli," she whispered again, closer this time. I spun around. Derek stood a few feet away, half lit by moonlight. He looked exactly as he had at the diner, no older, no different. "You found it," he said softly. "The journal." "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "You were never real, were you?" He smiled sadly. "I was real enough for what we did." "Tell me what happened," I said. He took a step closer. "You already know. You pushed her. You told me to." I shook my head violently. "No, that's not true." Derek tilted his head. "You've buried the truth so deep, you had to invent me to hold it. You made me the monster so you wouldn't have to be one." The world seemed to tilt. My flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, Derek was gone. Only the lake shimmered before me, still as glass. and reflected in it. Two figures, a boy and a girl, hand in hand, standing where I was. I stayed at the lake until sunrise. The truth came in fragments like shards of broken glass. Amy teasing me shouting back. Derek, my imaginary friend, telling me to prove I wasn't afraid. The shove, the splash, the silence. I'd buried it all. My mind had built Derek to hold the guilt I couldn't bear. When I drove into town that morning, I went straight to the sheriff's office. The deputy from before looked startled as I handed him the journal. "You need to reopen the Silver Lake case," I said. He asked why, and I told him everything. The memories, the journal, the hallucinations. I didn't care if he believed me. I needed it out. They searched the lake later that week. Near the old dock, they found what was left of a child's shoe tangled in reeds. DNA confirmed it was Amy's. After that, I checked myself into therapy. The nightmares still come sometimes. Amy's face in the water, Derek whispering in my ear. But I've learned to face them. Because Derek isn't out there. He's in here, in the part of me that broke when I lost my sister. The story of Derek and Amy reminds us that the past we run from never truly disappears. It waits for us to face it. Guilt, denial, and pain can twist into illusions if left buried too long. Healing begins not when we hide from our darkness, but when we confront it, accept it, and make peace with it. Truth, however painful, is the only path to freedom. Some people come into your life so early that they feel less like friends and more like extensions of yourself. For me, that person was Tom Harper. We met in the 2nd grade. Two awkward kids who both hated math and loved building forts out of cardboard boxes behind the gym. By middle school, we were inseparable. Tom was the dreamer, the one who always believed something great was waiting just beyond the next hill. I was more grounded, the listener, the steady one. Growing up in our small Oregon town meant there wasn't much to do but dream. Tom dreamed of leaving, of starting a band, of falling in love with someone who would understand him. He was the kind of person who felt everything too deeply, loved too quickly, and broke too easily. He had this way of talking about life that made you believe anything was possible. "Man, I'm gonna find someone who feels like a song," he once told me when we were 16, sitting on the hood of his dad's old Chevy by the river. You ever feel that? Like someone could be music? I laughed back then. But that was Tom. Everything had to mean something. We stayed close after high school. I went to community college. He worked construction and played guitar at local bars. He fell in love often, too often. Each time, he swore it was the one, and each time it ended the same way. Heartbreak and a late-night call to me, his voice rough from drinking and crying. But when he met Leah, things seemed different. She was older, smart, with a quiet kind of confidence that drew people in. Tom was mesmerized from the start. I met her once at a barbecue. She had warm brown eyes and the kind of smile that could hide sadness. When she talked, she looked at you like you were the only one in the world. They moved fast, too fast. Within 6 months, they were living together. I tried to warn him. "You don't even know her yet," I told him. He grinned that same reckless grin I'd seen since we were kids. "You don't get it, man. She's the one." But the cracks showed early. He'd call me after fights, small at first, then bigger. "She doesn't trust me," he'd say. "She thinks I'm cheating." Or other nights, "I think she's hiding something." Still, he stayed. Tom always stayed. The last time I saw them together before everything fell apart was at the grocery store. They were arguing quietly by the frozen food section. Leah's eyes were red, and Tom's hands were shaking. I almost went up to them but decided not to. I wish I had. Because 2 weeks later, he called me at 2 a.m. The ringing pulled me out of a half-dream. I saw the caller ID. Tom. My stomach dropped. "Tom?" I answered, voice groggy. His voice was raw, trembling. "Hey man, you up?" I sat up immediately. "Yeah, what's going on?" I need to see you. Now, please." "Tom, It's 2 in the morning. I know. I'm outside your building. Please come down. Something in his tone, flat, hollow, terrified, made my skin crawl. I threw on a hoodie and went downstairs. He was leaning against his car in the parking lot, head bowed. The yellow light from the street lamp made the red stains on his shirt look darker than they should have been. His hands were trembling, his eyes glassy. "Jesus, Tom," I whispered, walking closer. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head slowly. "It's not mine." I froze. "What?" "She's dead, man." His voice cracked on the word. "Leah's dead." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What do you mean she's dead?" I don't know what happened. We were fighting and then..." He ran his hands through his hair, leaving streaks of blood across his temples. I just remember her falling. There was blood. I tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't move. My mouth went dry. "Tom, where is she?" He stared at the car. "In the trunk." For a moment the world tilted. I took a step back, shaking my head. "You have to go to the police." "I will," he said, his voice trembling. I needed to see you first. Say goodbye." I could barely breathe. "What did you do, Tom?" He looked up at me then, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time in our lives I saw a stranger. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't remember everything. We were yelling. She said she was leaving. I grabbed her arm, and then she fell. There was so much blood." We stood there in silence, the night heavy around us. Finally, I put a hand on his shoulder. "You have to do the right thing. I'll go with you." He nodded, wiping his face. "Thanks, man. I knew you'd answer." And just like that, he got back in his car and drove away. I followed behind him to the police station. He parked, sat there for a long time, then turned to look at me through the window. I gave him a small nod. He smiled, a sad, broken smile, and walked inside. That was the last time I saw him free. The weeks that followed were chaos. The news spread fast in our small town. Local musician charged with manslaughter. Everyone had an opinion. Some said he was a murderer. Others said it was an accident. I visited him in county jail a few days after his arrest. He looked pale and exhausted. His hands shook when he picked up the phone behind the glass. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, voice hoarse. "I swear I didn't." "I know," I said softly. "What do you remember?" He stared at the table. "We were fighting about her ex. She said she was leaving me. I lost it. I grabbed her arm. She slipped, hit her head on the counter. I tried to help her, but there was so much blood. I panicked. You should have called 911. "I know," he whispered. I was scared. I thought they'd think I did it on purpose. The trial lasted 4 months. The prosecutors painted him as jealous, unstable, violent. The defense argued it was an accident, a tragic mistake. When the verdict came, guilty of second-degree manslaughter, Tom didn't cry. He just closed his eyes, nodded, and whispered, "Guess I'm where I belong." He was sentenced to 20 years. He was 28 at the time. I kept visiting him, not out of pity, but because I couldn't let him face it alone. The first few times, he barely spoke. He'd just sit there, staring at the wall. Over the years, the visits became routine. I'd drive up once a month, pass through the security checks, and sit across from him in the visitors' hall. "How's the band?" I once asked, trying to lighten the mood. He laughed dryly. "The band's me and 3 other guys who bang on tables." He looked older every time, thinner, quieter. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something heavy and unshakable. "I think about her every night," he told me once. The sound of her head hitting the counter, the way she stopped breathing. I replay it over and over. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened like I always had. He looked up at me. "You ever wonder what makes us snap? Like the exact second we stop being who we were?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think it's when we stop believing we can fix what's broken." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you're right." It's been 15 years now. Tom's halfway through his sentence. His hair's mostly gray, his eyes dull, but sometimes, when he smiles, really smiles, I see the boy I grew up with. The one who built cardboard forts and dreamed of songs that could change the world. During my last visit, he told me he was taking classes inside, literature, psychology. Trying to understand myself, he said, and her. Before I left, he leaned forward and said, "You ever think about forgiveness?" "All the time," I said. He nodded slowly. "I don't expect hers, but I hope someday I can forgive myself enough to breathe again." I squeezed his hand through the glass. "You will." As I walked out, I realized how much both of us had aged. The world outside was brighter than I remembered. People rushed by, laughing, living. I got in my car, looked in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, I swore I saw us again. Two kids by the river, dreaming about life, never imagining how it would end. True friendship endures even in the darkest places, but it cannot erase the consequences of our choices. We can love someone deeply, stand by them through their worst mistakes, and still learn that love alone cannot save them. In the end, forgiveness, both of others and of ourselves, is the only way forward. Every action, no matter how small or impulsive, can change a life forever. Grief changes how time moves. After my breakup with Aaron, the days bled together. Slow, gray, heavy. I'd wake up, stare at the ceiling, and wonder what the point of getting out of bed was. Work didn't help. My friends tried, but small talk and half-hearted pep talks only made me feel more hollow. Then one Thursday afternoon, as I sat at my desk pretending to read emails, a message popped up on my phone. "Natalie. Hey, stranger. You look like you could use a weekend away." I hadn't talked to Natalie in years. We met in college, freshman year, dorm neighbors, and hit it off instantly. She was bold, funny, and fearless, in a way I never was. After graduation, she'd moved to Denver, and I lost track of her. I blinked at the message. "Wow, long time no see," I replied. "How'd you know I needed a break?" "Natalie. I saw a post. You looked sad. Come up to my family's lake house. Remember it?" "Can't say I do," I typed back. "Natalie. You've been there before." I frowned. "Don't think so." "Natalie. You have. You just forgot." I laughed out loud. That was such a Natalie thing to say. Cryptic, teasing, dramatic. She sent the address, a cabin on Lake Whitaker about 3 hours north. I hesitated. Something about her wording, "You've been there before," stuck with me, but I brushed it off. By Friday evening, I was driving through winding forest roads with the radio humming low. The sunset spilled across the lake like melted copper when I pulled into the gravel driveway. The cabin stood at the edge of the trees, exactly as I'd imagined it. Old, rustic, but welcoming. Natalie came out onto the porch, arms wide, her auburn hair catching the last of the sunlight. "You made it." "Barely," I said, grinning. "Forgot how long these roads are." She hugged me tight, her voice soft in my ear. "You always come back." I pulled back slightly. "Always?" She laughed it off and grabbed my bag. "Come on, city boy. There's beer in the fridge and a fire to light." That first night felt easy. We sat by the fireplace, trading stories, laughing until my stomach hurt. For a few hours, the heaviness I'd been carrying lifted. But when I woke up the next morning, something felt off. The second day started fine. Coffee, pancakes, lazy lake air drifting through the windows. Natalie seemed radiant, alive, like she'd never left college behind. She kept talking about old times, but some of her references didn't make sense. "Remember when we went skinny dipping here?" she said, grinning. I blinked. "You sure that was me?" "I think you've got the wrong guy." She tilted her head. "Of course it was you. You got so cold I had to give you my blanket." I laughed awkwardly. "That definitely wasn't me." Her smile faded for a second. "Right. Guess I mixed things up." Later, While we fished on the dock, she mentioned something else strange. "You were gone so long last time," she said, threading the bait onto her hook. "What last time?" She stared at the water. "Before. When you left without saying goodbye." I wanted to ask what she meant, but something about her tone made me stop. I told myself it was nostalgia, or maybe she was drinking too much. That night we drank wine on the porch. The crickets sang. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. For a fleeting moment I felt content again. Then Natalie said softly, "You never said you were sorry." I froze. "For what?" She smiled faintly. "For leaving me." Her eyes looked glossy in the firelight, almost distant, like she was remembering something I wasn't part of. I changed the subject, made a joke about my ex, and she laughed. But as I went to bed that night, her words echoed in my head. "You were gone so long last time. You never said you were sorry." I dreamed of dark water and laughter turning into screams. When I woke up, I could still smell smoke. On the third night, everything unraveled. It was past midnight when I woke to the crackle of fire outside. The smell of burning drifted through the window, sharp, earthy, wrong. I threw on a jacket and stepped out onto the porch. Natalie was kneeling by the fire pit, flames licking the night sky. She was tossing photographs into the fire, old Polaroids that curled and blackened in the heat. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She flinched, eyes wild. "You shouldn't be here." I walked closer, the heat stinging my face. "Natalie, stop. What are you burning?" She turned toward me, her face streaked with tears and ash. "You don't belong here anymore." "What are you talking about?" She threw another photo into the flames. I caught a glimpse of it before it burned completely. Me and her on the dock, arms around each other. I was smiling. She was too. "I don't remember that," I whispered. "You were here," she sobbed. "You left me. You said you'd come back." "Natalie," I said carefully, stepping forward, "I think you need to calm down. Let's just talk." She screamed, voice breaking. "You left me to drown." I froze. "What did you just say?" She was shaking now, backing away from the fire. "You promised you wouldn't leave." The air seemed to tighten. I couldn't breathe. "Natalie, you're scaring me." "You should be scared," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "You were supposed to save me." And before I could move, she turned and ran toward the lake. I shouted after her, but she was gone into the darkness. I searched for hours with a flashlight, calling her name until my throat burned. But the night swallowed every word. By dawn, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my bag and left. I didn't look back. Back home, I tried texting her. Me. "Natalie, are you okay?" Failed to send. I tried again. And again. Same result. Her profile picture disappeared from my phone like it had never existed. For days, I convinced myself it was a bad dream. Maybe she'd lost service. Maybe she'd gone somewhere else. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more wrong it felt. A week later, my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Unknown number." "Hello? Is this Daniel?" a soft, older voice asked. "Yes?" "This is Margaret, Natalie's mother." My chest tightened. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Carter. Is Natalie okay? I've been trying to reach her." Silence. Then, "You were at the lake?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "She invited me up last weekend." Her voice trembled. "That can't be. Natalie, she drowned 3 years ago, at that same lake, on a weekend trip with you." The world tilted. "What?" "You were there," she said, her voice breaking. "You told the police you went to sleep and woke up to find her gone. They searched for days before they found her body." I felt my throat close up. No, that's not possible. I've never been there before. I would remember that." "She talked about you all the time," her mother whispered. "She said you promised you'd come back." The call ended, and I sat there in my living room, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. Then the news articles started showing up when I searched my name. The photos matched, the same cabin, the same lake. My name listed as a witness. The headline read, "College student drowns at family lake house. Friend claims memory gap." I didn't sleep for days after that call. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the whisper of air through the vents. I couldn't stop thinking about her face by the fire, the photos, the words, "You don't belong here." Finally, I drove back to the lake. I had to see it, had to know if it was real. The road was overgrown, the sign half buried in weeds. When I reached the property, my headlights fell on what was left of the cabin. Boards broken, windows shattered, the dock half submerged. It had been abandoned for years. I walked down to the shore. The water was perfectly still. I could almost hear her laugh echoing across the lake. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have come back sooner." The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke. I turned, and for a moment, I saw her, standing by the fire pit, smiling softly as if she'd been waiting all along. "Goodbye, Danny," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Then she was gone. The fire pit was cold and empty. When I got back to my car, the passenger seat was wet, as if someone had been sitting there. The past doesn't disappear just because we forget it. Guilt, grief, and memory are powerful forces that linger in the quiet corners of our lives, waiting for us to face them. Sometimes the ghosts that haunt us aren't supernatural at all. They're the echoes of what we failed to confront. You can run from your memories, but you can't outrun the truth. I used to think Rachel Morgan was unstoppable. Back in high school, she was the kind of girl teachers talked about like a legend waiting to happen. Straight A's, student council president, captain of the debate team. She had this calm, polished way of speaking that made everyone listen. Even the kids who didn't like her respected her. We grew up in Mill Haven, Oregon, a small logging town tucked between mountains and memory. There wasn't much to do there except dream about leaving. Rachel and I met in freshman English, assigned as partners for a poetry project. She wrote about skyscrapers and success. I wrote about the smell of rain on cedar. Somehow, it worked. From then on, we were inseparable. I was the quiet one, the listener. She was the planner. "We're getting out of here," she'd say, flipping through college brochures. "This place is a graveyard for ambition." We spent nights lying on the hood of her dad's old Chevy, staring at the stars. "One day," she'd whisper, "I'll have an office on the 40th floor, a view so high it'll make my head spin." I believed her. Everyone did. After graduation, she went east to Columbia University on a scholarship. I stayed behind, working construction with my uncle, saving money for a future I wasn't sure I wanted. She called me sometimes that first year, stories of city lights and late-night study sessions. But the calls got fewer. By junior year, it was mostly texts. By the time she graduated, even those stopped. I told myself it was normal. People grow apart. Life happens. But sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through her old photos, her smile, her confidence, and wonder if she ever thought of Mill Haven or of me. 10 years passed like water over stone. Then, one Tuesday morning, I saw her face on the news. It was one of those gray mornings when the coffee tastes like cardboard and the radio just hums static. I was half awake, scrolling headlines on my phone, when I saw her picture. Rising financial star arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The photo didn't look like the Rachel I knew. Her hair was darker, cut sharply at her jaw. She wore a navy suit, but her eyes, those sharp blue eyes, looked empty. The article said her real name was Rachel Morgan, but she'd been living as Rebecca Moore. She'd started shell companies across 3 states, funneling money through fake accounts. My phone buzzed with texts from old classmates. "Did you see this? Is that our Rachel?" Crazy, right? I couldn't look away. They said she'd been under investigation for almost a year, that her company collapsed overnight, leaving hundreds without jobs. The news anchors called it one of the most sophisticated financial cons in recent memory. But the photo, the mugshot, was what broke me. I recognized the faint scar above her eyebrow from when we built that treehouse in 10th grade. Same eyes, same tilt of the head. The girl who once tutored me in calculus now sat in a holding cell. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every memory I had of her, searching for signs I'd missed. The ambition had always been there, sure, but deception? Never. I opened my old yearbook. Under her senior photo, she'd written, "For Matt, thanks for believing I could touch the sky. Don't ever stop looking up." Now all I could think was how far she'd fallen. A week later, I drove 4 hours to the city jail. I didn't even know what I was hoping for. Answers, maybe, or closure. All I knew was that I needed to see her with my own eyes. The correctional center was cold, all steel and fluorescent lights. They made me empty my pockets, walk through a metal detector, and sit in a small room divided by glass. When Rachel walked in, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Her skin was pale, her posture stiff. She picked up the phone on her side of the glass but didn't speak right away. "Hey," I said softly, her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Matt," she said, her voice hoarse. "You actually came." "Of course I did." She looked down, twisting her hands in her lap. "Most people wouldn't." "I had to see for myself," I said. "Tell me it's not true." She stared at me then, eyes sharp again. "Which part?" "The part where you built fake companies, lied to investors, the part where you stole millions." Her jaw tightened. "They make it sound so simple." "Then explain it." She let out a hollow laugh. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." She leaned closer to the glass. "Do you remember what we used to say? That we'd never be stuck in Millhaven, that we'd make something of ourselves." "Yeah, but..." "I did it," she said. "I made it. The penthouse, the power, the respect. People listened when I talked. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl who had to prove herself. And now?" She smiled, bitter. "Now I'm a headline." I pressed my hand against the glass. "Rachel, what happened to you?" Her voice dropped. I stopped caring about the line between success and survival. At some point it blurred. We sat in silence. When the guard said time was up, she whispered, "You shouldn't have come." I shook my head. "You're still my friend." Her eyes met mine. "No, I'm not." And then she hung up the phone. I kept visiting, once a month, for almost a year. Some days she was open, others she barely spoke. But little by little the pieces came out. It started small, numbers, harmless adjustments to reports, playing the game like everyone else. But the higher she climbed, the more she bent the rules. "Everyone in that world cheats," she said once. "The only difference is who gets caught." I told her that wasn't true. She just smiled. "You still see the world like it's fair." I started noticing how she'd talk about herself in past tense. Rachel Morgan was ambitious, she'd say. Rebecca Moore knew how to win. It was like she'd split herself in two, the real one buried under years of lies. One afternoon she asked, "Do you ever think we could have had a normal life if we'd stayed in Millhaven?" "Maybe," I said. "But that wasn't you." "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't." Later, as I was leaving, she said something that's never left me. "You know what the worst part is? It wasn't the greed. It was the emptiness after I got everything I wanted. I looked out from the top, and it felt just like Millhaven, small and suffocating. That's when I knew I'd lost myself." I drove home in silence, the highway stretching endlessly ahead. Somewhere along that road, I realized ambition could be as dangerous as addiction. It starts as a spark, but it can burn everything if you don't control it. 2 years later, Rachel took a plea deal, 12 years in federal prison. When I went to say goodbye, she looked calmer, almost peaceful. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "Guess I finally have time to think," she said. You still writing those letters to your mom? I asked. She stopped answering, Rachel said softly. Can't blame her. I still believe in you, I told her. She tilted her head. You shouldn't. I don't mean the crimes, I said. I mean the part of you that used to dream under the stars. For a moment, her eyes softened. That girl's long gone, Matt. Maybe, but I saw her once, and maybe someday you'll see her again too. She didn't respond. As I left, she called out, Don't waste your life trying to save people like me. I turned. You saved me once. Freshman year. You said I was worth something. You don't get to take that back. She looked down, smiling faintly. Maybe I needed to hear that too. That was the last time I saw her. Sometimes I still drive past Millhaven High. The football field's overgrown, the bleachers rusted. I stand there and look at the stars, remembering the girl who wanted the sky. The world chewed her up, but part of me still hopes she finds peace somewhere inside those walls. Ambition can build empires, but when it becomes hunger without conscience, it destroys the very soul it once inspired. We chase success thinking it will free us, but true freedom doesn't come from climbing higher. It comes from knowing when to stop and remembering who you were before the world told you what to be. I was 34 and going through what you could politely call a rough patch. The contracting company I'd worked for in Austin had folded after a bad run of unpaid invoices. My relationship had fizzled, and I was living month to month in a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. My days were filled with odd jobs, fixing fences, painting porches, and pretending I still had a plan. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. Hey, it's Ethan, the voice said. Ethan Moore, from back home. The name hit like a memory I hadn't dusted off in a long time. Ethan and I had been inseparable as kids, riding bikes till dark, skipping stones, and dreaming about the future like we had any control over it. I hadn't seen him since high school. We talked for 20 minutes straight, laughing about stupid teenage stunts. Then he told me he owned a small renovation business just a few towns over. We do decks, remodels, that kind of thing. Could use another good pair of hands, he said. You interested? I didn't even have to think about it. The next Monday, I was driving out to a job site on Lake Travis with a thermos of coffee and the kind of hope you only get when life finally throws you a bone. Ethan looked older but the same. Short hair under a ball cap, that easy grin that used to get us out of trouble. He had two other guys working for him, local kids in their 20s who called him boss but clearly liked him. The pay wasn't great, but steady work felt like a miracle. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel stuck. The job was a dream gig. Rebuild a lakeside cabin deck for a retired couple who wanted it ready for their anniversary. It meant long hours, sometimes working under floodlights to beat the deadline, but the pay was double our usual rate. Ethan was in his element, barking instructions but always with a joke tucked in. Measure twice, cut once, unless it's Friday, then we just eyeball it, he'd laugh. By the end of the second week, the deck gleamed under the moonlight. Sturdy cedar planks, polished rails, the kind of craftsmanship you couldn't fake. The homeowners were thrilled and promised a bonus for finishing early. That night, Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. Man, we did good. Drinks on me at Keller's pub. You in? I hesitated. Money was tight, but his grin was contagious. Yeah, all right. One drink. Keller's was packed, neon lights bouncing off the wood-paneled walls, the smell of fries and beer thick in the air. Ethan knew half the people there. He was that guy who could make friends with anyone. Then he waved someone over. This here's my cousin, Mia. She was tall, dark-haired, and had that mix of confidence and nervous energy that made her hard to read. Her smile was warm, but her eyes darted to her phone every few minutes. Ethan elbowed me. She's single, man. Don't be shy. I laughed it off, but Mia and I ended up talking anyway, about travel, bad jobs, the heat wave that wouldn't end. When the crew finally called it a night, she asked if I wanted to grab one more drink at my place. I should have said no. Back at my apartment, the air conditioning rattled like it was dying, but Mia didn't seem to mind. She kicked off her shoes and looked around. "Cozy," she said, smiling. "You live alone?" "Yeah, always have." She poured herself a beer from the fridge like she'd done it 100 times. We talked for an hour, mostly about nothing. I noticed she'd keep glancing at her phone, screen lighting up, her thumb tapping fast, then sliding it face down. "You waiting on someone?" I joked. She forced a laugh. "Just a friend. He worries too much." Around midnight, just as I was about to suggest calling it a night, there was a heavy bang out on the door, once, twice. Then it splintered inward, kicked open. 2 men in ski masks rushed in, one holding a gun, the other a crowbar. "Where's the cash?" the taller one shouted. I froze. My brain couldn't keep up. I don't have much," I stammered. "Take whatever you want." Then the shorter one turned toward Mia. "Hurry up, Mia, we don't have time." The world tilted. Mia. She went pale. "Shut up," she snapped, but it was too late. The taller guy ripped open drawers, throwing things on the floor. They found my wallet, my old watch, a folded envelope with my bonus cash, maybe $300 total. "This all you got?" he barked. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking. They bolted as fast as they came, leaving the door hanging off its hinges and my heart pounding like it was trying to escape. Mia was crying, but it looked wrong. Too forced. "You knew them," I said quietly. She didn't answer. I called the police after she ran. By the time they arrived, Mia was gone, and so was any trace of her on social media. I gave a statement, described the men, described her. One of the officers, an older guy named Peterson, sighed when I mentioned Ethan's name. "You said Ethan Moore?" he asked. "He's got priors, petty theft, fraud. You sure you know him?" My mouth went dry. We grew up together. Over the next few days, the truth trickled in like slow poison. Ethan never had a license for his business. The company truck was leased under another name. And Mia, not his cousin, his girlfriend. The bonus was bait. They'd picked me because I trusted him, because I still saw the kid from our childhood instead of the man he'd become. When I tried to call, his number was disconnected. The police filed a report, but told me not to expect much. For weeks, I kept replaying everything. The handshake when he hired me, the laugh at the pub, the way Mia's hand trembled on her phone. Every piece fit perfectly once you knew the picture you were looking at. Trust, I learned, doesn't shatter all at once. It splinters quietly until one day there's nothing left but sharp edges. It took months to get back on my feet. I moved to a new apartment, smaller but safer, replaced the door with steel, and started working for a licensed contractor who paid fair and honest. Every so often I'd catch myself glancing at old photos. Me and Ethan at 15, grinning with fishing rods in hand. I wanted to believe the kid I knew was still in there somewhere, buried under the years and bad choices. But that's not how life works. Some people choose the easy wrong over the hard right, and friendship isn't strong enough to save them. Last I heard, Ethan and Mia got caught trying to pawn stolen tools in another county. I didn't feel vindicated, just tired. Sometimes late at night I stand on a half-built deck and look at the lake, the moon rippling over the water. Wood creaks under my boots, steady and true. And I remind myself that good work and good people still exist. I still build things for a living. Houses, decks, porches. But trust? That's one thing I'm still learning to rebuild. Trust is like wood, strong when cared for. But once it's been rotted through by lies, no amount of sanding can make it whole again. Test the beams before you stand on them. And remember, loyalty without honesty isn't friendship. It's just the setup before the fall. When I first moved to the South, I was 28 and running away from the noise of my old life. Germany had been home, but I needed space, sunlight, and a reason to start over. I found all that, and more, in a quiet Texas town with a single main street, a diner that closed at 8, and fields that rolled on like a green sea. The people there were good-hearted, curious about the European girl with the funny accent, and I felt, for the first time in years, that I could belong somewhere. I'd always loved animals, so when I learned there was no wildlife rehabilitation center in the county, I knew what I wanted to do. It took me a year, permits, inspections, endless paperwork. But with help from the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and half the town, I built a rescue center out of what used to be an old feed store. I named it Prairie Haven, because that's what it was, a safe place for the lost and broken. That's how I met Mark. He showed up one hot afternoon driving an old pickup, dust swirling behind him. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from weather and hard work, tanned, lined, and honest. He said he'd heard about what I was doing and wanted to help. He didn't ask for money, just said, "You ever need a hand, ma'am, you call me." And I did. Mark could fix anything. Fences, cages, plumbing, it didn't matter. He worked with a quiet sort of pride, like a man who'd spent his life surviving on skill and grit. Over the months, we became friends. He'd bring over scraps of meat from his hunting trips, old blankets from his parents' house, or extra feed from the co-op. In the evenings, after the chores were done, we'd sit on the porch with lemonade, watching the sun sink behind the mesquite trees. He told stories, wild, unbelievable ones, tales about fights in bars, dangerous hunts, and ghost stories from deep in the woods. I laughed them off the way you do with someone who exaggerates for fun. Mark could talk for hours, and though I rolled my eyes sometimes, I enjoyed the company. In a small town like ours, friendship was currency. It wasn't until later, years later, that I realized some stories aren't just stories. It was a humid summer night, the kind where the air feels thick enough to drink. Mark stopped by with a sack of bones for the rescue dogs. He smelled faintly of whiskey and wood smoke, his eyes glassy and strange. I'd never seen him high before, but that night, I could tell he'd taken something. His words slurred, his laughter off-kilter. We sat on the porch as usual. The cicadas screamed in the trees. Then, out of nowhere, he leaned back and said, "You ever do something so bad you couldn't tell nobody?" I thought he was just rambling, so I smiled awkwardly. "Can't say I have." He chuckled. "See, that's the thing. You good folks don't understand what a man's capable of when he gets pushed far enough." His tone changed, low, serious. Then he started talking about trips into the city, women he'd met, things he'd done that made my stomach turn. His words twisted darker and darker until I couldn't even breathe. He described killing, slowly, like he was remembering it. I wanted to scream, but I sat there frozen, praying it was just the drugs talking. When he finally looked at me, he grinned. "You ain't gonna tell nobody, right? Ain't nobody believe a story like that anyway." He laughed, got in his truck, and drove off into the night. I barely slept. My husband told me to calm down, said Mark was full of tall tales and probably out of his mind. The next day, I confronted him sober. He smirked and said, "Hell, I was tripping. You know me better than that." And I wanted to believe him. So I did. 5 years passed. Mark met a woman named Tammy, sweet, soft-spoken, with brown hair that caught the light. I liked her right away. She came by the rescue once, helped me bottle feed a fawn, laughing when it nibbled her fingers. She said Mark had changed, that he was kinder now, calmer. I wanted that to be true. But then she disappeared. I didn't hear from her for almost a year until one day I got a message from Mark. He said Tammy had stage 4 breast cancer. My heart broke for her. I reached out to offer help. When she finally replied, her words came through in trembling sentences. She told me he had been beating her, isolating her, controlling every move she made. He wouldn't let her get treatment. He told her dying was cheaper. I promised to talk to him. The next morning he texted, "Tammy's gone, died in her sleep." There was no autopsy. She was cremated within 2 days. The sheriff said it was natural causes. I didn't sleep for a week. After Tammy's death, I cut all ties. Mark didn't reach out, and I prayed I'd never see him again. But his name lingered like a stain in my mind. Every story he'd told, every look, every uneasy laugh, it all replayed like a film I couldn't turn off. Then, years later, in December of 2021, a mutual friend sent me a link to a news article. Father and son dead in apparent murder-suicide. It was Mark. He'd shot his own son after an argument about inheritance money, then turned the gun on himself. His father found them. The article described him as troubled. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called one of his ex-wives, the one before Tammy. She hadn't heard. We talked for hours. She told me about his cruelty, his manipulation, the times he'd nearly killed her. And then she told me he'd confessed to 3 murders, 3 women, all missing, all forgotten. I felt sick. I'd shared meals with this man. I'd laughed with him, trusted him, defended him. I'd let him near my animals, my home, my family. I'd been blind. After his death, the sheriff shrugged off the old stories. No missing persons fit the timeline. No bodies, no evidence. Case closed. But I can't close it in my mind. Sometimes I drive past the spot where his trailer used to sit. It's empty now, grass reclaiming the ground. The wind through the trees sounds like whispers. Ghosts of the people he hurt maybe, or just my conscience reminding me that monsters rarely look like monsters. They look like neighbors, friends, helpers, the kind of people who fix fences and tell long stories on summer nights. I still run the rescue. The animals keep me grounded. But there are days when I can't shake the thought that I'd once called evil by its first name, and smiled. Evil doesn't always wear a stranger's face. Sometimes it hides behind the smile of a friend, behind laughter and kindness, behind years of trust. The lesson isn't to live in fear, but to listen when something inside you whispers that something's wrong. Instinct is not paranoia. It's wisdom born from survival. Trust carefully, but never blindly. There are people you drift away from, and then there are people you run from. Dylan was the second kind. We'd met freshman year in college, 2 kids who thought the world owed them something. We shared the same humor, the same reckless need to push limits. He was the loud one. I was the quiet balance. For 4 years we were inseparable. Late-night road trips, cheap whiskey, girls, fights, and a sense that the future would sort itself out. Then came the night that ended everything. It was spring semester of senior year, a party off campus. Too much alcohol, too many unresolved grudges. He accused me of stealing his research idea for a group project. I called him paranoid. Things got ugly. Someone shoved someone else, a bottle broke, and I walked out before it turned worse. We didn't talk after that. No texts, no calls, no "sorry, man." Just silence that lasted more than a decade. Life moved on. I graduated, got a job in architecture, settled into a quiet rhythm, work, bills, small talk with neighbors. Dylan became one of those people you tell stories about in passing. Yeah, I used to know a guy like that. Then last winter, in the middle of a snowstorm, my phone buzzed. Dylan, hey, it's been a long time. Can we talk? I owe you an apology. For a long minute, I just stared at the message. I'd changed phones since college. I didn't even know how he got my number. I typed back, "You okay?" "Yeah. Just want to make things right. Diner off Route 6 tomorrow, 8 p.m. My treat." I told myself it was curiosity that made me say yes. But the truth was, part of me missed him. Part of me wanted to believe people could change. The diner sat just outside town, a squat building with neon lights that flickered like they were tired of trying. The snow was still falling when I pulled up, soft flakes swirling in the headlights. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried food wrapped around me like a memory. He was already there, or at least I thought he was. Dylan looked older, thinner. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and his eyes had the weary calm of someone who'd lived through storms. When he smiled, it was hesitant, almost shy. "Hey," he said. "Didn't think you'd come." "Yeah, well, I said, sliding into the booth. Figured you might owe me that apology you mentioned. He laughed lightly. Fair enough. We talked for a while, about work, old friends, how stupid we'd been back then. He said he'd been through therapy, had cut back on drinking, learned how to face his anger. There was a gentleness in his voice that hadn't been there before. Then as the waitress refilled our coffee cups, he asked quietly, "Do you still hear the screaming sometimes?" At first I thought I'd misheard. "What?" "The screaming," he said again, his eyes fixed on mine. "You told me it stopped after we buried her." I froze. My mouth went dry. "There was never any screaming," I said. "What are you talking about?" He frowned, confused. "You said you didn't remember. Back then you said you were drunk, but I remember everything. The woods behind the old dorms. You begged me to help. I thought..." "Stop," I snapped. "That never happened." But his voice broke when he whispered, "Then why can't I stop hearing her?" Something inside me twisted. Fear, confusion, disbelief. I tossed a 20 on the table and walked out without another word. Outside, the snow had turned to ice. I didn't look back. 2 weeks passed before I heard the news. It was a Wednesday morning. I was scrolling through local updates on my phone when a small headline stopped me cold. Man found dead in apparent suicide. Dylan Hayes, 35. The date of death. The same night we met at the diner. At first I thought it had to be wrong, maybe a coincidence. But the photo was unmistakable. Him, smiling awkwardly in a work uniform, same crooked grin. I stared at it until my coffee went cold. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the diner meeting happened earlier that day. Maybe he'd done it after I left. But a thought wormed its way in, small and impossible to ignore. What if he'd already been dead? The next day, I drove back to the diner. The waitress remembered me. "Were you here the night of the snowstorm?" I asked. She nodded. "Sure was. You were sitting in that back booth talking to yourself for almost an hour." I blinked. "Talking to myself?" She frowned. "You okay, hon? I figured you were on the phone or something. There wasn't anyone with you." My legs went weak. I thanked her and stumbled outside. The cold bit into my skin, but I barely felt it. If I hadn't seen him, then who had I spoken to? That night I pulled out an old college photo. Me and Dylan, arms around each other, smiling in front of the dorms. Behind us I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. The edge of a wooded area, half covered in shadow. The woods he'd mentioned. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that grief and guilt could twist memory, that maybe he'd been delusional. But sleep didn't come. The more I thought about it, the more fragments surfaced. Flashes of that night we fought, voices yelling, a girl crying, running footsteps. Had there been someone else there? I drove back to campus the next day, parked by the old dorms. The woods were still there, smaller than I remembered. I walked through brittle branches, heart hammering. Nothing but silence. No graves, no signs, no proof. Just trees and snow. When I got back to my car, there was a note under the wiper. One sentence written in messy handwriting I recognized instantly. "You finally came back." My breath caught. I looked around. Empty lot, wind howling. No footprints but mine. The nightmares started after that. Every night I'd hear footsteps outside my apartment door, faint scratching on the walls, whispering. Sometimes I'd wake up to see my phone screen glowing, a new text notification. "Do you hear her now?" No number attached. Just those words. I stopped answering calls, stopped leaving the house after dark. I told myself it was guilt, imagination, stress, but part of me knew better. Dylan had come back not to haunt me, but to remind me of something I'd buried. A month later, I moved away. Sold everything I couldn't fit in my car. I haven't been back to that town since. But sometimes when it snows, I swear I see footprints outside my window. 2 sets, side by side, leading nowhere. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, I think I can still hear her screaming. The past doesn't stay buried just because you pretend it never happened. Truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, demanding to be heard. Face your ghosts before they find you, because some echoes never fade. I've never been good at ignoring people who need help. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's habit. Either way, that's how Jake came into my life. It was early spring, one of those dull stretches when the days blend together. I'd been working at a home improvement store in the outskirts of town, night shifts mostly, stocking shelves and closing the registers. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid steady and kept my mind off the messiness of life. A friend from my old neighborhood texted me out of the blue one evening. "Hey, my buddy Jake's looking for work. Any openings where you're at?" We always needed people, so I told him to have Jake swing by. When he showed up, I almost didn't notice him at first. He was tall, thin, maybe late 20s, with washed-out blonde hair and eyes that didn't quite meet yours when he spoke. He had that polite, quiet way about him that makes you feel like you should talk more to fill the silence. "Thanks for helping me out," he said, voice low and deliberate. "No problem," I replied. "It's not a bad place to work. Good people. You'll get used to the hours." He smiled, a small, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Something about it felt off. I couldn't explain it, but it was like standing in a room that's too quiet, where you can hear every creak and hum. Still, I pushed that thought away. People can be awkward. Everyone deserves a chance. I helped him fill out the online application and even walked him through the background check process. The store manager, Denise, liked his resume. Clean, simple, nothing remarkable. "He seems like a good kid," she said. "Bit quiet, but we could use someone steady." The first interview went fine. Jake answered questions in short, clipped sentences. When asked about his last job, he said, "Didn't work out. Some misunderstandings." Denise nodded, made a note, and told him they'd schedule a second interview soon. Afterward, a few of us grabbed lunch at the diner across the street. Jake tagged along. He didn't talk much, just sat there stirring his coffee while the rest of us laughed about store gossip. Every now and then, he'd look up suddenly, like someone had called his name. But no one had. "You okay, man?" I asked. He blinked. "Yeah, just thinking." It wasn't until later that I realized his version of thinking always came with this strange intensity, like he was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. Still, he was polite, never rude or pushy. A few of my coworkers liked him, said he was just shy, but there was a restlessness behind his calm, a tension that didn't fit the picture. At night, when I closed the store, I caught myself imagining what it would be like working alone with him. The thought made my stomach twist for reasons I couldn't explain. The night before his second interview, I couldn't sleep. Something about Jake kept circling in my mind. Maybe it was the way he always avoided direct questions, or that odd flicker in his eyes when people laughed too loud. I don't even know why I did it, but I typed his full name into Google. The first result hit me like a brick. Local man arrested for making violent threats in 2018. There was a grainy mugshot. Him, unmistakably. The article said he'd been charged after threatening a co-worker with a knife at a warehouse job, claiming they were planning something against him. Charges were later dropped due to mental health concerns. My heart pounded. I reread it 3 times, hoping I was mistaken. But it was him. Same eyes, same blank stare. The next morning, I brought it to Denise. She was shocked but calm. "We'll handle it," she said. "We'll let him know we're not moving forward." She called him that afternoon. He didn't argue, didn't ask why, just said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." And that was it. No drama, no follow-up. Life went back to normal, or at least, it seemed that way. It was late summer when I saw his face again. I was at home, eating dinner, the TV on low in the background. A local news anchor's voice broke through my thoughts. Police have identified the suspect in the murder of a 23-year-old woman found near Riverside Park. Then came the picture. Jake. The same photo from his application, cropped neatly under the headline, "Suspect arrested after random killing." I dropped my fork. The story played out like something from a nightmare. They said he didn't know her, just followed her from a bus stop, attacked her in the dark, and vanished for 2 days before turning himself in. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, kept to himself. That phrase echoed in my head. Quiet, polite. That was Jake. I turned off the TV and sat in silence, thinking about all the times he'd been in our break room, smiling faintly, talking about nothing. I thought about the night shifts we almost would have shared, alone in a dim store, doors locked, aisles empty. The thought made me shiver. Weeks passed, but the story never really left me. Coworkers talked about it now and then, shaking their heads. "You can't tell with people," Denise said one afternoon. "Some just hide it better than others." She was right. I kept replaying everything, his stillness, his eyes, the uneasy quiet that seemed to follow him around. I'd written it off as awkwardness, maybe loneliness, but my gut had known better. There's a reason instincts exist, I learned. They're the quiet alarms we train ourselves to ignore. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't looked him up, if he'd been hired. If that night, instead of a young woman at a bus stop, it had been me closing up, counting the drawer, hearing footsteps behind me. Now, whenever we hire someone new, I pay attention, not just to their resume or handshake, but to the space between their words, the tension that hums beneath silence. You can't always know who someone really is, but sometimes you can feel it. And I've learned never to silence that feeling again. Instinct is the mind's quiet guardian, soft, subtle, and often ignored. When something inside you whispers that something isn't right, listen. Logic can explain away doubt, but instinct doesn't lie. It remembers what danger feels like. I hadn't seen most of the guys from high school in over a decade. Life had pulled us all in different directions. Careers, marriages, kids, divorces. But somehow, a group chat that started as a joke turned into an actual plan. It was Brandon's idea. One night, downtown, comedy club, drinks, laughs, nostalgia, no excuses. So one Friday in early spring, I found myself standing outside a brick building with neon lights spelling out the Laugh Vault, waiting for familiar faces to show up. The air was crisp, the kind that carries the smell of beer and cigarette smoke from the nearby alley. Brandon arrived first, looking the same except for a little gray in his beard. Then came Mike, married with twins now, wearing a hoodie that said "World's Okayest Dad." Finally, Tyler, who still talked like we were all 17 and the world owed him a good time. "Man," Brandon said, hugging each of us in turn. "Feels like yesterday we were getting detention for skipping class." "Yeah," I said with a grin. "Except now we pay for the privilege to stay up late." Inside, the club buzzed with energy. The lights were dim, tables crowded, laughter spilling from the stage like static. The show was good, really good. For a few hours it felt like the old days again. No responsibilities, no deadlines, just friends and bad jokes. When the headliner wrapped up, we drifted toward the bar, riding the high of nostalgia. It was there, between rounds of cheap beer and shared stories, that I noticed someone watching us from a few stools down. He was tall, slightly heavy-set, with messy hair and the kind of smile that felt half familiar. He raised his drink when our eyes met. Then he said, "No way. Brandon? Tyler? Holy crap, it's really you guys." At first, none of us recognized him. Then Brandon's face lit up. "Trevor? From middle school?" That name pulled me back decades. Trevor Cole, the quiet kid who sat behind me in 8th grade history, always doodling in his notebook, always trying to fit in. He'd moved away after sophomore year and I hadn't thought of him since. Now here he was, older, rounder, but with that same eager grin. "Man, what are the odds?" Brandon said, clapping him on the back. Trevor laughed. "Small world, huh?" I actually work here. Backstage crew. Help with lighting and security stuff. Been here a couple years now. He said it with the casual confidence of someone who belonged. And in that moment, we believed him. Trevor slipped right into the circle like no time had passed. He bought a round, told a few jokes, and caught up on everyone's lives like he'd been following along the whole time. He said he was single, living nearby, working odd hours with the club. He talked about comedians he'd met, some famous, some not, and how crazy it could get backstage before shows. Tyler leaned in, intrigued. You serious? You actually hang out with these guys? Trevor grinned. Sometimes. I know the headliner tonight, Eddie Lennox. Real cool guy. He usually sticks around after the show. I could probably sneak a couple of you in for a quick meet and greet if you want. That got everyone's attention. You're kidding, Brandon said. No joke. Eddie doesn't usually meet fans unless it's arranged through the club, but I could get you in after midnight once the crowd clears. We all exchanged glances. It sounded too good to be true, but Trevor spoke with such conviction, it felt legit. Man, that would make my night, I said, half drunk and grinning. You serious about this? Trevor nodded. Just wait till the staff finishes up. I'll text you when it's time. The rest of the group was hesitant, but my girlfriend, Emily, nudged me under the table. You've been talking about meeting that guy for years, she said. Let's go for it. So, we waited. We laughed, ordered another round, and kept an eye on the door as the crowd thinned. By 11:45, only a handful of people were left. Then Trevor waved from across the bar. You two, come on. Now's the time. Emily and I followed him through a side hallway past the bar, the lights dimming as we went. Something about the way the air shifted felt wrong, like we'd stepped out of the party and into a place we weren't supposed to be. The hallway smelled of cleaning solution and old carpet. A dull red employees only sign hung crooked above a gray door. Trevor led confidently, his shoulders squared, as if he knew every inch of the place. You sure this is okay? Emily whispered. Totally, Trevor said. Eddie's just wrapping up in the green room. You'll love him. He's one of the good ones. We passed a stack of boxes labeled lighting equipment, then another door with a keypad lock. My gut tightened. I thought you said you worked security, I said. I do sometimes, Trevor replied without turning around. Depends on the night. I started to reply, but before I could, a loud voice boomed down the hallway. Hey, what the hell are you doing back here? Two men in black security shirts came around the corner. One of them radioed something while the other reached for his holster. Wait, Trevor shouted. It's cool, they're with me. But the guards weren't buying it. Within seconds, one of them grabbed me, slammed me against the wall, and yanked my arms back. Emily screamed. Don't move! You're trespassing! I tried to explain, but it was chaos. Trevor backed up, hands raised, stammering. It's fine. It's me, Trevor. Tell Eddie I'm cool. The guards looked at each other. One muttered into his radio. We got him again. Again. That word stuck in my head as everything blurred into shouting, confusion, and flashing lights. We spent nearly 3 hours in a cramped office while the police sorted things out. Emily was crying, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. I sat there numb, repeating the same words over and over. He said he worked here. We thought it was okay. The officers were calm but skeptical. One of them finally came in and said, You two can go. You're not in trouble. But your friend, he's being detained. Detained for what? I asked. The officer sighed. Your friend doesn't work here. Never has. He's been showing up for weeks trying to get backstage to talk to one of the comedians. The club's banned him twice already. Tonight he used you to get past the front area. It took a moment for that to sink in. You're saying he used us as a distraction? Exactly. He figured if he brought a couple of normal-looking customers with him, he could blend in. Emily covered her mouth. Oh my God. They let us leave just after 3 a.m. The air outside was freezing, cutting through the lingering smell of beer and sweat on my jacket. Brandon and the others were still waiting near the parking lot, worried and confused. When I told them what happened, Brandon's face went pale. "Trevor? That's insane. He didn't seem—" "No," I interrupted. "He didn't. But maybe that's why it worked." None of us said much after that. We just stood there in the dim parking lot, the city humming quietly in the background, each of us realizing how easily we could have been part of something worse. A few days later, I got a call from a detective. He said Trevor had been ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation. Apparently, he'd been stalking the same comedian for months, sending letters, hanging around the club, pretending to be staff. When they searched his apartment, they found photos, printed schedules, even maps of the building. It was obsession, not friendship, that brought him to us that night. I deleted his number, but I couldn't delete the feeling. The thought that someone you once knew, someone who laughed at the same jokes and shared the same cafeteria, could grow into a stranger capable of dragging you into his delusion without you even realizing it. Sometimes I replay that night in my head. The laughter, the drinks, the comfort of old memories. And then the turn. The moment that laughter curdled into something dark and unfamiliar. It wasn't just the lie that hurt. It was the betrayal of memory itself. Because when someone you once trusted looks you in the eye and says, "Come with me," you want to believe them. You want to believe the past still means something. But that night taught me otherwise. Not every familiar face belongs to the same person you once knew. Time changes people. Sometimes quietly, sometimes dangerously. Trust is precious, but blind trust can be a trap. When something feels wrong, pause before you follow, because not every door a friend opens leads to safety. There's something about old friendships that makes you forget time. You can go 10 years without talking, then fall right back into step like nothing ever changed. That's how it felt when Marcus texted our group chat last May. One weekend, just us, cabin up in the Smokies, no phones, no stress, just like old times. I stared at the message for a long minute, smiling despite myself. We used to talk about going off the grid every summer after high school, beers, bonfires, and bad jokes. But life got in the way. College, jobs, families, the usual excuses. Marcus was always the glue of the group, confident, easygoing, a natural leader. If he said, "Let's go," you just went. By the time June rolled around, we had a plan. 5 of us: Marcus, me, Jenna, Chris, and Tyler. We loaded up 2 cars with coolers, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to feed a small town. The drive was long but easy. Winding roads lined with pines and lazy rivers, country radio humming in the background. It felt good. Familiar. The cabin sat on the edge of a ridge, surrounded by tall evergreens that whispered when the wind moved through. Marcus said his uncle left it to him after he passed. A fixer-upper, he'd called it, though it looked solid enough. The porch sagged, but the roof was sound, and the view stretched for miles. That first night felt like we'd turned back the clock. We grilled burgers, drank too much, and talked about the dumb stuff we did as teenagers. The parties, the fights, the heartbreaks that seemed so big back then. By 11, a fire was crackling outside, sparks rising into a black sky full of stars. Tyler strummed an old guitar while Jenna laughed at everything he said. It was perfect. Simple. Then Marcus stood up, bottle in hand, and said something that changed the whole tone of the night. "There's something I want to show you guys tomorrow," he said. "Something I found in the woods." We all laughed it off at first. Marcus was always the storyteller, the guy who'd swear he saw Bigfoot or ghosts just to mess with us. But the way his eyes shifted toward the dark line of trees behind the cabin told a different story. "It's weird," he said softly. "I don't even know how to explain it." No one pressed him that night. We figured it was just Marcus being dramatic, but something in his tone left a chill in the air that the fire couldn't shake. Morning came quiet, sunlight cutting through the mist like pale ribbons. I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon, The kind of breakfast that only tastes that good in the mountains. Marcus was already outside, sitting on the porch steps with a faraway look in his eyes. "You still want to see it?" he asked when I stepped out. "See what?" "The thing I found." The others joined us after breakfast, curious but half joking about it. Jenna teased him. "Please tell me it's not another dead raccoon you're calling a mystery." Marcus didn't laugh. We followed him down a narrow trail behind the cabin, maybe half a mile through the trees. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of leaves underfoot. When we reached a clearing, Marcus stopped. His hand trembled as he pointed ahead. Half buried in the dirt, surrounded by moss and tangled roots, was a car. A rusted-out sedan, the kind that might have been sitting there for years. But it didn't look old. At least, not completely. The paint was still visible under the grime. One door was ripped clean off. Chris whistled. "How the hell did that get here?" Inside, we saw clothes, a child's backpack, a pair of shoes, personal stuff, and not from decades ago. Then Jenna leaned in and gasped. She pulled a flashlight from the passenger seat, one of those sturdy camping ones. "Guys," she said, voice trembling. "Look." Etched into the metal near the handle were the letters M.T. Marcus's initials. Marcus went pale. He took a step back, then another, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. "I didn't put that there," he said quickly. "I swear to God I didn't." Tyler frowned. "Then how the hell did your flashlight end up in a buried car?" Marcus took a deep breath. "That's why I wanted to show you. For weeks now, someone's been leaving things from this car on my porch. First it was a glove, then a photo, then the keys. I thought maybe a hiker found this wreck and was screwing with me, but..." He trailed off, staring into the trees. Chris shook his head. "Why didn't you call the cops?" "I did," Marcus said. "They came out, looked around, said there was no car, nothing. They thought I was making it up." None of us spoke. The air felt heavier. Then, somewhere beyond the trees, something cracked. A branch. Heavy footsteps, maybe. Jenna jumped. "What was that?" We turned off the flashlight instinctively. Silence swallowed us. Then, another sound. Closer this time. Marcus whispered, "We should go." And we did. Fast. By the time we reached the cabin, it was past midnight again. The woods had gone eerily still. When we broke through the tree line, the cabin's porch light was flickering. The front door was wide open. Marcus froze. I locked that before we left. We went inside carefully. The air smelled like smoke and something metallic. The living room looked untouched, except for one thing. On the table lay a photograph. It was the 5 of us, taken that very morning. Tyler swore under his breath. "That's not funny, man." Marcus shook his head. "It's not me." We locked every door, every window. Marcus grabbed the rifle his uncle kept above the mantel, hands shaking so bad he could barely load it. We called 911, but it would take hours for anyone to reach us that far up the mountain. Then outside, near the tree line, movement. A figure tall and still, just beyond the edge of the firelight. Marcus aimed the rifle, whispering, "Get back." When the headlights of approaching police finally cut through the trees, the figure vanished. And Marcus was gone. The police combed the woods for days. They found footprints, multiple sets leading toward the ravine, but never coming back. They found the car too, the same one we saw, but this time the trunk was open, empty. They never found Marcus. Months passed. The story made local news. Missing man in Smoky Mountains, they called it. But to us it was something else entirely, something that didn't fit neatly in a headline. Sometimes I dream about that night. The crunch of leaves, the half-buried car, the photograph on the table. And sometimes I think about Marcus's face when he said someone had been leaving things on his porch. He looked scared. but not just of whoever was doing it. It was something deeper, like he already knew the truth and couldn't bring himself to say it. Maybe the shadow that night was following him. Maybe it was waiting for him. Or maybe it was him all along. I guess we'll never know. The past doesn't always stay buried, especially when you go digging for it. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered, and some people aren't who they used to be. Trust your instincts, value your peace, and remember, when someone invites you into their darkness, don't follow them too far in. I've always believed the best friendships are the ones that outlast change, the kind that survive college, careers, marriages, and moves. Our group was that kind. 8 of us, friends since middle school, meeting every Friday night no matter what. It started as pizza and video game nights in someone's parents' basement. Then it became dinners at restaurants, backyard barbecues, birthdays, weddings. We'd grown up, but somehow stayed together. That's why it felt strange when Lila texted one evening, "Mind if I bring a coworker tonight? He's new in town and doesn't know many people." Nobody objected. We were all welcoming by nature. Besides, how could one more person hurt? That was the first time I met Nathan. He wasn't particularly striking, but he had presence. That quiet kind of confidence that makes a room pay attention without realizing why. He smiled easily, but his eyes seemed to study you, like he was cataloging who you were before deciding what version of himself to show you. He didn't try to dominate the conversation. He asked questions, remembered details. When Marcus joked about hating his boss, Nathan chuckled and said, "You know, I actually know someone at your company. Maybe I can put in a word." We all laughed it off, but a week later, Marcus got that promotion he'd been chasing for months. That's how it started, with small miracles that felt like coincidences. Before long, Nathan was at every Friday dinner. He'd fix things, connect people, offer advice that somehow always worked. He made you feel seen, like you mattered. But there was something else underneath it, a sense that we'd all started orbiting him without realizing it. And I didn't see it until much later, by which time it was already too late. By late spring, Nathan wasn't just part of the group. He was the group. He'd text first about plans, suggest where to meet, and somehow always get everyone to agree. If someone couldn't make it, he'd convince them they could. "Come on," he'd say with that calm, easy smile. "It won't be the same without you." And it wouldn't be. Marcus started hanging out with him one-on-one. Maya, who had been struggling to find a new place, suddenly owed Nathan big time for connecting her with a landlord who approved her instantly. Even my sister, who barely knew him, had her car fixed for free through a buddy of his. He was helpful. Too helpful. At first, I thought I was being cynical. After all, what's wrong with someone being generous? But there was something about the way he watched our reactions, like every favor was a test. One night at Lila's apartment, he brought up her boyfriend. "I don't like him," Nathan said quietly after Lila stepped out of the room. "Why?" I asked. "He's hiding something. You'll see." The following week, Lila broke up with her boyfriend. She said Nathan had been right, that she'd found messages from another woman. That's when the group started trusting Nathan more than we trusted each other. His opinion became fact. His judgment was law. And if you disagreed with him, he didn't argue. He just smiled a little less the next time he saw you. That's when I noticed how his compliments had turned conditional. How he'd praise you when you agreed and go silent when you didn't, like a teacher disappointed in his favorite student. Summer came, and things started to feel different. The laughter at dinners sounded practiced. The inside jokes felt rehearsed. We weren't talking to each other anymore, not really. We were performing for Nathan. One night he suggested a digital detox weekend. "I have a cabin," he said. "Out in the woods, no service, just us, a chance to reconnect." Everyone loved the idea, everyone except me. I said I had work that weekend. He smiled. "You work too much," he said gently. "You need this. Trust me." It was strange how those words, "Trust me," felt like both comfort and command. That week, I started noticing little things. Nathan always paid in cash. None of us had ever seen where he lived. He knew everything about us: birthdays, family details, secrets we'd told in passing. But we knew almost nothing about him. I asked Lila about it one afternoon. "Have you ever been to his place?" "No," she said. "Why? Doesn't that seem weird?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Nathan's just private. Besides, he's been there for all of us. Don't overthink it." I let it go. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Because deep down, I knew someone that good at reading people isn't being kind, they're being careful. We drove up on a Friday evening, 2 SUVs full of snacks, sleeping bags, and false excitement. Nathan's cabin turned out to be more like a lodge, big, secluded, the kind of place with no signal and no neighbors for miles. He greeted us at the door, calm and smiling. "This weekend is about unity," he said. "We've all been drifting. Let's fix that." The first night, he led a trust circle. We laughed, shared memories, drank. It felt harmless. Until it didn't. He asked questions that cut too deep, about loyalty, secrets, regrets. Whenever someone hesitated, he'd press just enough to make them talk. It was subtle, but you could feel it. The pressure to confess, to please him. At some point, Lila started crying. Nathan put a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe here." That phrase, "you're safe here," sounded more like a warning than comfort. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, I saw Nathan outside by the fire pit, staring into the flames. "You should sleep," I said. "I don't sleep much," he murmured. "I like watching things burn." I laughed nervously, but his face didn't change. He turned to me, eyes cold. "You don't trust me," he said. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The fire popped between us, and for the first time since I met him, I felt genuinely afraid. The next morning, Nathan was gone. His car, his phone, his bag, all there. But no Nathan. We searched the woods, called his name until our voices broke. No service, no help. Just the 8 of us, or 7 now, and a growing sense that we'd never really known him at all. When we finally got back to town, a week later, we filed a report. The police checked the cabin. No records, no lease, nothing. It wasn't his. Nathan didn't exist in any database we searched. Not under that name, not under any of the ones we guessed. It was like he'd never been there. Over time, our group fell apart. Friday nights faded into silence. We still talk sometimes, but it's never the same. Too much trust lost in one person who'd never earned it. Sometimes I still dream of that cabin, of Nathan's voice saying, "You're safe here." And I wake up wondering if we ever really left that place, or if a part of us is still there, sitting around that fire, trying to understand how someone so perfect could be so wrong. Not everyone who brings people together does it out of kindness. Some do it for control, for validation, for the quiet power of being needed. The most dangerous kind of manipulation isn't loud. It's soft, generous, and patient. Never let someone decide who you are by how much they approve of you.